To ensure that our media product would be successful as we felt it could be, I decided to research people's general feelings towards horror films and to find out which previously made horror films were their favourites. This research revealed that Hitchcock's Psycho was a well-ranked and appreciated film, and that the majority of people preferred the earlier horror films created in the 80s and 90s in comparison to the new releases of today. I then chose to take my research further and asked 30 random people what their favourite horror film villain was. This survey concluded that masked killers were the most popular choice, followed by serial killers whom had a specific technique or weapon used to construct these killings. Ghosts were closely followed behind, which left vampires and zombies as the most unpopular villains, as people stressed to me that they felt these characters were these specific characters have run their course and predictable as well as unrealistic to watch. You can see this also in page 26 of my portfolio. After gathering this information, we decided to use ghosts as the main feature of our media product as it was fairly highly ranked, and also as we felt that masked and serial killers would be more difficult for us to base a film around and keep it original. We decided to reinvent certain features from both the Paranormal Activity sequels and Hitchcock's thriller Psycho in our film, as we wanted to use both old and modern films as our inspiration. Hitchcock's use of voyeurism was recreated throughout certain scenes in our film to show the idea of 8-year-old Katie being watched, this making the audience feel uneasy as a medium and long tracking shot followed her journey both to and from the graveyard. We wanted to add our own twist on Hitchcock's idea of voyeurism, so we decided when editing our footage to add an extra element over two certain tracking shots of Katie in which she would be viewed through what appeared to be a video camera viewfinder. We wanted to do this as we felt it would add an extra scare factor to the audience and also to make it unpredictable and modernise the original sense of voyeurism that Hitchcock used. We chose to use an unseen ghost in our film, as was shown in Paranormal Activity, as we felt that this would add a sense of mystery of the unknown, as the ghost's identity would be hidden, this leaving the audience to create an image of what they wanted the ghost to look like in our films, getting them more involved and also keeping them interested in the film as they would feel they were a part of it. The scene in Paranormal Activity where one of the characters gets dragged out of bed by the demon had a major impact on us when watching, as you couldn't see the demon itself, which made it a lot more uneasy as viewers. Therefore, we decided to take this scene and reinvent and develop it further ourselves. We used a high-angle shot of Ellie, who played the character of Katie, to make her appear vulnerable, and then another member, Harry Long, pulled her feet rapidly so that she was pulled out of the frame, this maximising anxiety for the audience as they were unaware of what was pulling her. By using a graveyard as one of the locations to film our product, we used the typical convention of horror to allow the audience to feel the foreshadowing of something bad happening. But we then challenged this convention by filming the graveyard scene during the daytime, which we felt was unexpected and nerved the audience even more due to the reversing of a typical convention which the audience would not have experienced before. We also used a typical horror convention by using an isolated house in the middle of a village as our location for our film. Yet, once again, we challenged this as the house looked like a realistic homely house that would be lived in by a regular family, but as it was isolated on its own, we felt that it could make the audience feel uneasy as the characters living there would have no way of escaping. The timings between each of our scenes got shorter as the film began reaching its climax. This was purposely done to show the audience that time had passed, but the ghost of Thomas was becoming more violent, putting Katie in more danger as the film progressed. Throughout our film, we used smooth transitions to make the audience feel relaxed until adding in extra non-diegetic bangs and quick jump cut transitions for the 3 final scenes in our opening, which would be unexpected and suddenly frighten the audience and make them want to know what was going to happen next. Our horror film consisted of 2 characters, a single middle-aged mother and a young 8-year-old girl. We wanted to ensure that we made these characters as believable as possible in order to make our film look realistic. We looked through many different magazines, both fashion-orientated and celebrity gossip magazines. We did this to enable us to dress our characters in a way that suited both their current situation and personalities. We wanted to be able to represent inspirational single mothers, both famous and not, and a stereotypical fun-loving 8-year-old girl. The mother's hairstyle was kept very low maintenance and natural, as the scenes used with her in portraying the idea of relaxing everyday jobs such as walking the dog and speaking to her daughter. We did this as we wanted to show the idea behind her feeling comfortable in her own skin. We wanted the mother to portray the idea of women being strong-minded and able to look after themselves. Therefore, we decided to dress the mother in trendy, fashionable clothing that was also suitable for the role that she was playing, but in an understated way. The use of the dog in the second scene we felt represented a majority of mothers, as it was a very homely symbol, and walking a dog becoming something usually done with another person. But by not having a male figure there, we replaced the male with a daughter, which shows the strong bond between them two, and how she is focused on her child, as the majority of other mothers do. The dialogue exchange between Katie and her mother as they appear in a two-shot at the kitchen table is very calm and relaxed. We wanted the mother to reflect mothers in both the celebrity and real-life worlds through the way in which she speaks, and by using the word sweetie when speaking to her daughter, this connecting the two very well. The idea behind pet names came from personal memories as children, as we remember pet names that our mothers used to call us. Also, by looking at other films involving similar characters, also allowed us to ensure that we were representing women in a positive way. Young children were represented by a character of Katie in the film through her use of dialogue, clothing and props. We styled her in clothes that were girly and appropriate for the scenes that we were filming her in. The bright, vibrant, floral-coloured dress at the beginning of the sequence was inspired by an American magazine called OK USA, in which there was a famous actress's 8-year-old daughter that was wearing a similar styled dress in A Day Out. We felt that the floral print related to the typical mindset of an 8-year-old girl, in which they're excitable and want to wear pretty outfits to try and act grown up like their mothers. Her hair was styled in 2 bunches at the side of her head, which we felt was a very stereotypical convention of young schoolgirls around her age bracket. This was a quick styling technique that we felt would right away enable the audience to roughly figure out her age within the first 3 scenes. The dialogue used for Katie was non-complex and written in fairly short sentences, which were purposely did to show the vocabulary we felt a typical 8-year-old would be in contact with. By watching films such as Matilda and Home Alone, we were able to draft a rough script of standard words spoken by younger children to ensure that Katie reflected the majority of 8-year-olds around the world. In the 2-shot of Katie and her mother at the table, we had Katie drinking out of a Donald Duck Disney mug. We felt that this was appropriate as it reflected the mindset of most stereotypical 8-year-olds, believing in all things magical and living their life carefree. We also related a small section of our story to current affairs, which are heard about in the news daily, this being the abduction of children. We chose to do this as we felt it would enable us to represent certain social groups who had ever been involved in a similar situation. Even though Katie did not get taken, she did run off and go missing for a while, this leaving the audience feeling anxious to see if she returns or not, this also happening in real life day to day. The film company that we feel would be best to both make and distribute our film would be Hammer Film Productions. After a lot of online research on possible distributors, this particular company stood out to us as we discovered that it mainly focused on creating films surrounding the horror and thriller genre. They have made many sequels that lead on from both the Frankenstein and Dracula series, both of which are extremely memorable and successful horror films. One of the main reasons why we chose Hammer Film Productions is due to one of their latest releases, Women in Black, starring the likes of Daniel Radcliffe and Janet McTeer. It was released in the United States and Canada on 3rd of February 2012 to generally positive reviews, and was released in the United Kingdom on the 10th of January 2012. The film itself surrounds the storyline of a young solicitor, Arthur Kipps, played by Daniel Radcliffe, who continuously keeps hearing and coming into contact with the ghost of a mysterious woman dressed in black. He lives with his 4-year-old son, Joseph Misha Handley, and his son's nanny, played by Jessica Raine. The fact that the main feature of their film surrounds a mysterious ghost immediately connects both HDB Productions and Hammer Films together. Also, both of our films and The Woman in Black have younger children characters that both come in contact with the ghost. These links were an immediate primary factor for us to use them as the creators and distributors of the unseen. In The Woman in Black, Daniel Radcliffe plays the lead role. This made us think about the future of our film and how by using famous actors such as himself, we would be more inclined to have a successful film due to the wide fan base surrounding certain actors. During Hammer Film's most successful years, they were described as dominating the horror film market, enjoying worldwide distribution and considerable financial success within the partnership that was created between themselves and the extremely successful film company Warner Bros. This attracted us as it allowed us to feel comfortable with the idea that with two successful companies on board, our film would be more open to becoming successful within the film industry and market. The target audience for our film would be a mixed gender of both the men and women of the ages 13 and above. Yet despite this, we feel that as the film itself stars women as the lead roles, we feel that it would be more inclined to attract an audience of women as the more dominant sex. After researching the types of audiences who would be most likely to watch a horror film involving ghosts, I've created a few character profiles of the type of audience we are aiming our film towards, which can be seen on pages 34 and 35 in my portfolio. We also did a horror film survey on people who felt would be most inclined to see our film, and also advancing on a few extra people who were unsure as to whether they would choose to watch our film or not. The information we gathered can be found on my blog under the title Horror Film Survey. We came to the conclusion that our film would be most likely to attract teenage girls aged 15 plus due to the storyline and characters in which our film involves. Also, due to the styling of the characters and the way in which they are spoken, may possibly relate to certain audience members and attract the type of audience we are aiming for. To attract our target audience, we felt it would be necessary to advertise our film on social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter. The reasoning behind this decision stemmed from research that the majority of people, both men and women aged 13 and over, owned a computer or smartphone and which allowed them to be part of a social networking site that they used on a daily basis. Also, we felt that by advertising our film in certain trendy magazines that it would also be an interest to people in our film who perhaps were not part of a social networking site. In order to ensure that our advertising would attract the right audience and that people would be interested to read about it in the first place, I created a questionnaire for 2 people, asking them a variety of questions about different things surrounding advertising. The questionnaires here are also followed below. My questionnaires concluded that the majority of teenagers are involved in social networking sites and use it in the most common way of keeping up to date with latest film releases and finding out information about them. This, therefore, I found was the best way for us to be able to advertise our film to make it attract the right type of audience that our film was aimed at. But also, by advertising it in a mixture of different magazines, it would allow us to attract all different types of audiences who may be interested in our film. When producing our media product, along the way I learnt many different techniques about using the different sets of equipment. The filming of our product was the most straightforward for me as we used 2 different cameras, my own one from home and one that we borrowed from the school library, and the 2 cameras were very simple to control. The filming was no challenge at all. It was only when it came to using Final Cut Express for the first time on a Mac computer which seemed daunting. Yet over the course of producing our project, I have learnt how to use Final Cut to make it as beneficial to me as it should be. Here is a picture of a basic layout for Final Cut Express. Whilst editing our film, I had to quickly discover what all these highlighted areas were used for. I felt that Final Cut was fairly simple to use, and it did not take long for me to feel comfortable with it. I found it easy to cut down clips using the razor blade tool in order to be able to get rid of the excess footage that was not needed. Having to remember to render the footage all of the time got confusing, as we would think it would be okay, but then when we realised that by not rendering each section as we went along, we ended up having to render the whole thing together, which took a far longer amount of time than it should have done, and that this could have been spent progressing our film further using Final Cut. I learnt how to add an extra non-diegetic and diegetic sounds to make our film more dramatic. We chose to get our sounds from a website called freesounds.com. This website therefore enabled us to search for different sounds that we wanted to add in and then choose out of a selection of sounds for the best fitting one. The sounds we found were the loud bangs, door creaks, the continuous music that played throughout, and 2 sets of music played at the beginning and end of our film. All we had to do was download these sounds directly from the website, save them into our group area on the Mac in our folder, and then drag them underneath the part of the footage where we wanted the sound to come in. For example, we wanted to have a continuous piece of music named Spooky playing throughout the film, so we placed it here, as seen in the picture below, and stretched it out to make it fit for the whole duration of the film. For any extra sound that we needed, we placed it in at the very bottom of the timeline so that it would be able to be heard in the scenes where we needed it. For example, the chair squeak that we needed for these scenes where Katie walks out the kitchen door was added in underneath once we'd finished using Final Cut. When reviewing our preliminary task, we realised that it seemed a long time ago since the dynamic of our original group changed, and we were left to think of a brand new idea for our final product. I felt that I've learned tremendous amounts and made a lot of progression when it comes to thinking of original ideas and learning how to use all of these different technologies available to me. When we first started creating our preliminary task, I was a complete amateur and had no idea how to work some of the equipment and how to use different camera angles and editing techniques to try and create a certain effect for the audience. I feel that I've become a lot more independent when it comes down to thinking of original ideas and putting my points across to others. From our preliminary task, I learnt that costuming, props and hairstyling were a major factor in setting a certain scene and portraying the personality of the character that was being shown on screen. I now feel that location of a scene is key to be able to achieve the right feeling and response surrounding the genre of the film that we are aiming our final product towards. I have learned that by using a variety of different camera angles, movements and shots, what a huge impact it can have on the audience's reaction to a certain pinpoint within a film, and also the sound that can be added when editing footage has a massive impact on the audience also. For example, in our final film, the 3 final 2-second clips at the end of our film I think were extremely effective due to the way in which they were filmed using high angles, close-ups and extreme close-ups to show the emotion and expression on the character's face. Then, by adding in or dramatising the sound that was already there, we were able to create a really spooky effect on the scene, which, without the angles or editing used, would not have been more as dramatic as it was in the end. I feel that the shot in our preliminary task, whereby the girl dressed in black is followed down the stairs using a mid-close-up tracking shot, is really effective, and as a viewer it made me feel very vulnerable and uneasy about the situation that I was seeing before me. So therefore I was very keen to add it into our final product to see if it would have a similar effect. I feel that the tracking shots used in our final film, where the character of Katie is viewed in a long shot through a viewfinder, which we added during our editing process, worked just as well and was made to be even more effective than that of our preliminary task, as we learnt and developed the camera movement further to really dramatise the shot to emphasise the spooky factor of the horror genre that our film was based around. Overall, I feel that I've progressed a lot from when I started out in our preliminary task. I feel that I've been able to fully throw myself completely into my work and be really creative and enthusiastic about my ideas when it comes to brainstorming brand new ideas or adjusting old ideas for our final film. I've become more confident in myself through experimenting with different editing skills and filming techniques, which I feel that I wouldn't have been able to do at the beginning when doing our first preliminary task.